Hello and welcome into another episode of the Creative Juices Podcast, episode number 5. This is a solo podcast wherever you're listening, whenever you're listening. Appreciate you listening in tonight. Um, Happy Thursday. It's almost the weekend. As always, my name is Keegan Hartman. Make sure you find me and follow me on my socials at Kigo Amigo via Instagram, at Keegan Hartman1 via Twitter. Again, this is going to be a solo podcast. Originally, we were going to have Jarius Clark, my previous guest, on episode 4, which was a great podcast. If you haven't listened to that yet, make sure you go and listen to that. Show it some love. Great story about my friend Jarius and his startup in this industry as a videographer. Gives great insight to his story, and he was going to be coming on and joining me for episode 5 so we can answer to some questions that you guys may have. We will get to that. We're still planning on doing that, but Jarius couldn't join this week due to some personal reasons, some family matters that he had to take care of. So my thoughts are with Jarius as he navigates this time, and excited for whenever he comes on to help answer those questions. But in the meantime, this is a solo podcast. It's off the riff. It's improvised. It's probably not going to be super duper long. I wanted to kind of share with you guys sort of my story. I've had a lot of you reach out and share positive feedback on this podcast, and I'm immensely grateful for it. But I felt like it was a good moment. We're kind of halfway through the season, and I got a couple more, actually, a few more guests that I'm going to be bringing on to close out this back stretch of the season. But I wanted to take this time to sort of give you my background on this, career path for young creatives that are trying to get into this industry. I felt like that this would be a good opportunity to share with you sort of my story and my perspective on the field of being a creative, whether it be a graphic designer, glasses are fogging up, a videographer, whatever the case may be. I figured that this would be a great opportunity to share that story because I didn't originally start in graphic design. I originally wanted to be a sports journalist. That was originally what I went to school for. And so I guess that introduces the story. So with that being said, we can go ahead and get right into it and kind of dive into my story, dive into my past, and tell you a little bit about my background and how I've kind of got to where I am today. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right. So I come, like I said, come from a small town called Joplin, Missouri. Um, Grew up in the metro area of Joplin called Webb City. Shout out to the Cardinals. And yeah, small, tight knit community, blue collar. Everybody knows everybody. That sort of community. Really loved it. Really loved living there. Um, Attended Webb City High School. I have two wonderful parents. Grew up in a small, tight knit community. Um, had wonderful parents growing up. Had wonderful siblings. Still have wonderful siblings and parents to this day, which is a blessing. And yeah, went to Webb City High School. Um, when I attended high school, I didn't necessarily know what my passion was. I always had a passion for football. I played football from middle school all the way up until high school. And then when I got around my freshman year, I started to realize football wasn't necessarily the thing for me. And around my sophomore year, I started to try to explore other things and try to see how I could kind of remain around the sports in general, and also kind of, do something else. Maybe that wasn't necessarily playing the sport because I knew I wasn't going to have a career in the sport. If you know anything about Webb City, they are known for football. That is one of the most, I guess, illustrious programs in the state of Missouri. At the time, they were like a 4 or 5A program, and I think they're a 5A now, if I'm not mistaken. But 17 state titles, constant district champions. I mean, from the time I was in high school, maybe a little bit thereafter, they had been district champs for probably somewhere in the ballpark of 15 to 20 years. Somebody can correct me on that. Any of my friends back home, I don't necessarily know the number, but they are a winning program. And they were a winning program under Coach John Roderick, who has since retired from coaching football. But nevertheless, you wanted to be a part of it growing up. Everybody in the town loves football. On Fridays, you're going to Webb City, John Roderick Stadium now, but Webb City Cardinals Stadium on Friday nights. You're hanging out with your friends. You're watching, I mean, these guys are duking it out on Friday nights. And so that sort of community and that sort of, I guess, camaraderie made me gravitate towards the sport of football. And I think it's a general consensus for a lot of people to really look at the game, and maybe for any sport, whether it be basketball or baseball. Sports just does something for communities. It rallies people together, it brings them together. And so that was kind of where my passion started with, being around sports and wanting to have something in sports, to do something in sports. And so when I get to high school, I realize I'm not good enough to necessarily go to the NFL. I might as well do something around the sport because I feel like that's going to give me my best, direction in life, if you will. I don't know what to call it. So I started getting involved with a bunch of different groups, starting with, journalism. Shout out to Miss Kelly if she's watching this. She was a big impact on, she had a big impact on me and getting into the print and digital and media world. And also Mr. Vonderhaar in multimedia. Both had tremendous influence on me getting into the field that I am in today. And if I would have taken it more serious at a younger age, I'd probably be a little bit more well established. But again, I, I feel like my career paths and what I wanted to do at a young age kind of changed from, week to week, month to month. And I think once I started to take those classes a little bit more serious, being involved with multimedia, learning the ebbs and flows of Adobe Creative Suite. Mind you, by my sophomore year, I was learning how to edit video and everything. I fell in love with editing video before I got into graphic design. That was where my true passion was. And I could not shoot a camera for the life of me. I honestly couldn't tell you how to shoot a camera really perfectly to this day, but for me, that was kind of where the passion took root and sort of the fire was ignited, if you will. And so getting into Premiere Pro, getting into maybe a little bit of InDesign and Photoshop along the way, not too much, that kind of really stirred the pot and sort of, I guess, was the foundation to me getting into this industry to begin with. So flash forward into my senior year, and I'm trying to figure out where I want to go, and I'm touring all these schools as everybody does, and trying to get an idea for where I want to go and everything. And I really gravitated towards Missouri, the University of Missouri, but I was sort of hesitant because I felt like I don't know if this school is going to accept me. I wouldn't say I was a bad student in any stretch of the imagination. I was constantly, grinding it out and doing everything I could to maximize, my time in the classroom. And I took it serious. But in the same breath, like test taking abilities, poor. Taking the ACT, horrible experience. I ended up getting like a 21 on it. I mean, nothing impressive. And so I was like, there's no way in heck that I'm going to be able to get, any sort of scholarship or any sort of opportunity or even get accepted into Missouri. And so I applied for some other smaller schools, which there's no issue with that, going to Pittsburgh State, going to Missouri Southern State. But I really gravitated towards Missouri because they're one of the most illustrious programs when it comes to the School of Journalism. And albeit the School of Journalism is nothing to play about, the School of Journalism is prestigious. And, I would soon encounter that when I made my way up to Columbia. But, from afar looking at it, it's like, what is going to give me the best opportunity to excel in sports journalism was my thought process at the time. And the University of Missouri was that. The alumni, Seth Wickersham, Kay Adams. John Anderson. I mean, these guys have built a name not just within sports journalism, but investigative journalism. Doc J. I mean, every single facet, whatever you want to explore, whatever you want to emphasize in journalism and in the journalism field, they have the tools and they have the makings to make a student successful in those fields. So. Um, for me, that was 1000% the I felt like the direction I needed to go, and pricey for me, like expensive. I still got college debt to this day, and but I'll tell you what, being a part of that opportunity and being able to go to that university, um, I got accepted. I ended up getting accepted in probably mid to late fall of 2000 and fudge 2017 if I had to guess. Yeah, it would have been 2017. And yeah, the rest is kind of history. Ended up getting it up there in August of 2018. And I'm not going to lie, that first semester navigating the waters of being in journalism, it's easy in the first semester. It gets harder as you progress, as I'm sure many of you would know. Once you got through that first semester, you're like, wow, this is kind of smooth sailing. It wasn't necessarily the journalism classes that were the hard part. Those were the easy part for me. The hard part was doing all the other extracurricular bull jive that they had you going through, like, taking a Spanish class, doing economics and philosophy. I remember walking out of my philosophy class because I was like, this is stupid. This is ridiculous. And yeah, that's a no-no. I would not recommend that. I ended up getting put on academic probation because of my performance in those aforementioned classes. And that ultimately got me, I guess, withdrawn at the time from being in the J school. So I sit out for a semester, and I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. And I'm talking with my academic advisor on what I need to do in order to kind of get back into that field. And I was, entertaining the idea of pursuing a communications degree, and ultimately and inevitably figured that would be the best route for me because I didn't want to take a victory lap, be a fifth year, and have to spend more money that I didn't have to be able to accrue my degree from the journalism school. And I felt like with communications, you are just as dynamic. So going into mass communications was going to be the best alternative to that. Ironically, I would get accepted in back into the J school, but at that point, I was like, you know what? I might as well just pursue communications and stick with it. So I ended up getting my degree in mass communications from the University of Missouri. And along the way, I would say a lot of the things that I was interested in are far different from what I'm doing now. I wanted to be a radio broadcaster. I got involved with the on-campus radio station KCOU 88.1 FM, and that's where I found the passion for this. This is where I found that passion, doing my own radio show with my colleagues. Shout out to Ryan Crothers and shout out to Brandon Anthony, good friends of mine that I still keep in touch with to this day. For 4 years, we would hit the radio, the airwaves, if you will, at, 8, 7 a.m. Didn't matter if there was, 10 people listening, 20 people. It wasn't that many because we were up so freaking early. I wouldn't expect a college town to be up listening to us. But the fun in being able to put on a production and having full creative, um, you know, development around that show, that just gave me so much like life and energy. I looked forward to it every Friday, every Thursday that we'd have the show, being able to come in and talk about stories in sports, things that were trending. And that really pushed me to kind of find a creative identity that associated with Breakfast of Champions. I didn't want just people on the airwaves to see it. I wanted to be able to maximize it with the skill sets that I had. And being primarily in Adobe Premiere, I wanted to be able to transfer all of our content onto social media platforms. And, I wasn't privy to any other, any other shows at the time doing that kind of stuff. And I was like, all right, well, let me take a stab at it. And that sort of even further establish that love and that passion for doing more social media content and more video and podcast work. And I ended up going to the Hall of Fame and Shrine game, getting to shoot photos there, and then also getting to go to the NFL draft for, 3 of the 4 years that I was here, or at least 2 of the 4 years, obviously COVID-19. But we probably would have went to Cleveland too. But um, yeah, those opportunities were unique opportunities, getting to go and meet, the NFL Network cast members, Rich Eisen, Kurt Warner, Daniel Jeremiah, Charles Davis, and just going to like Nashville and going to Las Vegas when the draft came there. Those were unique opportunities for me that I still cherish to this day, and it further just established this love and passion for the field and wanting to be able to pursue that as a full-time passion. Along the way, I guess I ended up taking an opportunity with Pro Football Focus as an intern. I was doing a bunch of digital media stuff for them. I produced for the Ari Mirov podcast when it was just taking off, the Richard Sherman podcast, among others, and kind of having my hand in sort of working, doing intern responsibilities and being able to put together reels for their content. Some of the social media one-offs, as they called it, we used to get our uh, task list delegated through a spreadsheet, and creatives would go in and just, put their name next, excuse me, put their name next to it, and then they would take that task. You'd pretty much have a day's turnaround to be able to put those pieces of content out. And it was cool when you'd go on social media and you would see like those videos that you put together. I still have some of the videos in my camera roll from some of the interviews, the Richard Sherman podcast when he's talking to Leonard Fournette years back. Ari Mirov, some of his stuff with Adam Schefter, which I actually, it was really cool, albeit I was cutting Zoom video and putting some overlays on it. But to see that stuff on like the Pat McAfee show and to see those clips on ESPN, I know that the grand scheme of things, it wasn't, necessarily my work. I was just cutting the video. But to have seen that and witnessed that firsthand, and then to be able to, I guess, see that, on TV and on other platforms and people talking about it, I was like, wow, man, this is really cool. I really want to continue to do something like this and to continue to follow this path. So I did. I mean, that was something that I could vividly remember, and those were sort of those moments in my life where I was like, yeah, I want to be able to do something in social media and digital media around sports, and I want to follow that pursuit. So lo and behold, I end up graduating from the University of Missouri in the spring of 2022. I get my mass communications degree from the School of Arts. And after that, I was really adamant. Like I had that, I guess the big head, like, oh man, I'm gonna land an opportunity. I'm gonna get something right out of college, and everything's gonna be PG keen. I'm gonna work for a sports team. I'm gonna work in radio. I'm gonna do this, that, the other. And it didn't happen. I went back home. I was with my parent, living with my parents, and just trying to figure it out. And I took up some part-time jobs, and it wasn't working at the time. It wasn't, I guess, the time for me to be able to take on those sort of opportunities. So, I guess after that, not being able to find those opportunities and not getting anything to, I guess land, if you will, um, I end up. It's kind of where the story sort of takes a little bit of a turn. And I don't necessarily like to talk about this part of my life because I don't like to give these people their due, and they know who they are. And I'm not going to say their names, and I'm not going to say their business. Um, I'm working the part-time job, living with my parents at the time, and a mutual friend of mine who knew this business reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I think you'd be a good fit here. Um, you should check this opportunity out." All right. So I reach out to these individuals. This is a smaller, so a little bit of context. This smaller business owned by a father and son. I didn't really read into their past. I didn't necessarily know about their past, which I would come to find out there was a lot tagged with their past that I should have been privy to. And I know, ironically, I'm a journalist. I should have done my research. I didn't. Shame on me. But anyways, mutual friend I trusted, and they were like, you should reach out to these guys and see if you can help. So I reach out to them, and I'm basically inquiring about opportunity to help them, and they oblige. Um, and when I say like, you know, a normal business would have a brick and mortar. A normal business would have a place where they do business. That's what businesses have. Maybe not all. There's certain circumstances and certain caveats, but if you're an established business, especially doing video content, having interviews and sets and what have you, you would be under the impression that they might have like a brick and mortar or something like that, or a place where they would do work. And this place didn't. The matter of fact, the brick and mortar that they originally had or initially had, they had been kicked out of. And I mean, I never got into that story. I never did my research. Again, that's shame on me. But anyways, to make a long story short, I end up agreeing to doing some work for these guys, and they had so many red flags tied to them. As we progressed in working, whether it be, you know, our meeting space was at their apartment, for one. For two, they didn't really have the most top of the line equipment that you would normally expect with like even a local radio station. They weren't that. Even a local broadcast booth or whatever broadcast entity, they were none of those. But yet somehow they were still tagged, involved with local programs, and nobody, nobody did their research or due diligence if they were a high school, you know, doing their research on this company. It's just it baffles me. I wasn't the only one that sort of drank the Kool-Aid, if you will. I was like, well, they must have, they have a good reputation with, most of the school systems around us. Surely they're credible and they're trustworthy. Yeah, that's far from the case. Um, anyways, so I did some work for these guys for about a month, and when I say work, I mean we were just really ideating and planning for this fall ahead. It's probably a month out. I think I like agreed to work with them in the month of July. And then as we got to August, we started planning out doing all these different broadcast things. And really all these ideas were just kind of like, it got to the point where I was bringing my equipment and sort of bringing everything that I had to these meetings and these discussions. And I don't think they had ever seen sort of the equipment that I had based off the equipment they had. And I'm not like degrading them in that sense, but like they just weren't ahead, they weren't with the times. They were very, I guess, old school, if you will, and a lot of the ways that they did things. And there's no problem with that. It's just some of the things it's just like, what are you talking about? And what are you doing? And I saw that as sort of an opportunity for me to maybe make them better in a sense. And so, I wanted to get them more involved on social media. They were primarily on Facebook, and for them, they saw it as a cash cow because they were able to produce stuff for, parents. Parents love, photos and videos of their kids. And looking at some of the content they had on Facebook, it was just god awful. Like it wasn't even good. It wasn't even remotely good. The interviews that they had with coaches were just poor. Not good at all. And it's just like, why am I not thinking of this stuff in the moment? Why am I not, stepping away and doing my due diligence about this organization? I don't understand to this day. I don't know why I didn't see the red flags. But anyways, um, so I see all this stuff happening on their social media platform, and I'm like, all right, I want to step in and I want to be able to develop, I want to add on to this. So I went ahead and took the initiative of putting out an Instagram or building them an Instagram account and building them a Twitter account. And we gained a little bit of a following, solely because the high schools and the athletes, real, off topic, but like athletes are, you hate it or love it, athletes are about them, about the vanity. They're about the spotlight, especially younger athletes. And not to say that they're selfish, but they definitely love it when outlets are talking about them in a positive light, and families eat that up. And I was like, okay, so how can I tie in these interviews and sort of a graphics, I guess, space? I'd never done graphics before up until that point. It was a whole new, venture for me. And that, I guess, was where the gift came from such a rough period of my life, which we'll get into shortly, promise. But like, I started doing graphic design. I started teaching myself Photoshop. I started teaching myself how to do these different graphics and adding these different elements to the content that we're putting out. And it was, athletes of the month, player spotlights, player performances, what have you, those types of things. And I just dressed their social media up with everything that I had, and they appreciated it. But as we, progress forward in this relationship, we get into the month of August, and we're about to prepare for the season. And I've been with the business up until that point for like 4 weeks. It was probably 3 or 4 weeks if I had to guess. And I was uncompensated. I had not been compensated anything. And there was a tentative agreement, and it wasn't even in principle. It was also, I had to sign the non-compete, which ridiculous. I think those are stupid, but like I had to go through all that process and everything. They had me sign all these documents. We agreed in principle on compensation and everything like that. And we get to the point in August where I'm uncompensated. I have not been compensated a single thing. And I confront them about this. Mind you, this is just a father and son running this. This is a small, not even a business. It's really just to me, I mean, I guess you could have called it a hobby, but they had some money in the business that I'd come to find out, baffling how they were able to obtain such funds. But they had money to keep it running, and I ended up not getting compensated until I was confronted. So I thought. And afterward, once, I receive my check and I get paid for the work that I had done, which I had put in hours, there were sleepless nights where I was just constantly grinding Photoshop and just trying to put stuff together to help build their content and build their identity, running their social media, putting their content out, sending it to them to get revised and reviewed or whatever, uh, like they really knew what they were doing. Again, naive, stupid me. And then, we put that content out and it would do numbers for all their platforms. And for me, it made me feel good. And I'm sure for them, they probably really, appreciated it. But anyways, I ended up doing that work, get compensated. Well, a week later, come to find out that check bounces. My account goes negative, and I am left shocked as to why, I went technically uncompensated, but rather overdrawn by a significant amount of money. And at that point, I felt prompted to then do my research. Come to find out that this business, the two people involved in this business, had been known for writing fraudulent checks. And it spanned back as far as 10 or so years. The dad had an extensive criminal record, and it was just it was a whole debacle. It was an absolute debacle. It was an absolute crapshoot. And I felt embarrassed. I felt embarrassed. I felt stupid. I felt dumb. And it just looking back on the whole situation, I I try not to keep malice and I try not to keep anger towards anybody. As somebody who believes in Christian faith, you try to learn to forgive, and it's hard to forgive those people because they wronged me in such a bad way. Um, but I'm content because I've really reflected on it today. Without that whole debacle happening, I don't think I wouldn't have gotten into Photoshop. I actually created my first graphics working with them. So that in and of itself, um, that really built my portfolio, I guess established my portfolio. And then they weren't good graphics by any means, any stretch of the imagination, but it was my foundation, the foundation of my career. And so, flash forward, I end up leaving that company, and I'm like, I can't. They did me so dirty. I want nothing to do with them. And I could get into, the stories that went on thereafter and the arguments we had and all this different stuff. And I don't want to get into that because it's too much of a headache to sort of relive. But um, I ended up working for a local advertising agency for a few months to get my feet, a little bit more wet in graphic design. And this was nothing to do with sports. It was automotive industry and some local restaurants being able to do some one-off marketing for these local businesses in Joplin, Missouri. And that really started to further my knowledge and my comprehension for graphic design. And so I took that opportunity. And while it was tedious, while I may have not been so much invested in the content I was putting out, I am appreciative because without that stop in my life, I don't think I gain an understanding for some of the stuff that I learned from the people that I worked with there. Some of the colleagues there really wanted to nurture my skill set I didn't even know that I had, and they wanted to maximize it any way they could. And so I was greatly appreciative of the people that I was surrounded with to help further my career in graphic design at that point. And so you get to March of 2023, and I end up taking an opportunity. Now, mind you, we get into March of 2023. I have no, like, there's just out of the blue, the USFL, then the USFL, United States Football League, is hiring for a freelance social media coordinator through Fox Sports, who had owned them at the time. And it was based in Birmingham, Alabama, which I saw and I was like, man, this is a big move. I don't know if I'd be ready for this or if it's something that I'd be prepared for. And then there's that part of me that I was like, man, I ain't even gonna get a call. I'm not even gonna get a time of day from these guys. Well, lo and behold, I ended up getting an interview opportunity with them. Shout out to Madison if she's watching this as well. I take an opportunity with Fox Sports because my colleague Madison at the time, she saw something in me. She saw some potential, whatever she saw. She granted me the opportunity to join her team in Birmingham. USFL was comprised of four different hubs at the time. You had Birmingham, um, you had, oh my gosh, Michigan, Birmingham, Michigan. I think not Philadelphia, although the Philadelphia Stars were in it. I want to say I want to say Canton, Ohio, and Memphis, Tennessee. I think were the four hubs that you had. Um, and so, anyways, I ended up taking the opportunity there, and I moved to Birmingham. And when I get to Birmingham, I'm thinking that, I've made it. Like, this is the opportunity that I'm going to stick with and ride with forever. Again, young and naive, young and oblivious to a thing called future and, a thing called God's plan, I guess. Shout out to Drake. But, anyways, I take this opportunity and I ended up before going on this excursion and this job, I bought a Black Magic camera with the support and with the help of some of my family. They wanted to help me and they were like, "What can we do to help you in making this move down there?" And I was like, "Well, I'm gonna be doing video work, video content as a freelance social media coordinator." And I might need a camera. And my granddad, he wanted to give me a camera, and I'm immensely indebted to him. He didn't have to do that, and I that like that's kind of some of the stuff that keeps me motivated to want to do more and more because I want to be able to eventually, even with this podcast, even with the stuff I do, the people that have supported me are are the biggest thing for me. They're the people that I want to give back to tenfold. And I want to be able to do as much as I can because without them, I don't have these opportunities that I have. And so I end up, getting that and going down to Birmingham and, you know, I get there and it's just like a whole new thing for me. I'm around these teams probably 6 out of the 7 days of the week, honestly, 7 out of the 7 days of the week. And I'm going to this field, documenting different types of content, and I'm collaborating with people from Fox Sports, man. Like just a kid from Joplin, Missouri, like getting to go to Birmingham, Alabama, and getting to work with Fox Sports, producers. My colleague at the time was contributing to the NFL on Fox Instagram account and Twitter account and their social media platforms, was really like literally putting together some of the templates for like their breaking news stories or their updates and those types of graphics. And it was just like, wow, like I'm really in this and I'm really contributing to this. And I'll say this, from a money standpoint, I'd never been more comfortable in my life, but I was so stupid for, heck, I'm still not all there, but like financially, like I was making a lot of money, more money than I've ever made. And I was being reckless because I was like, I've never had this, I've never had that, I've never had this. I could have paid credit card debt, I could have paid, my college debt, and I was just flaunting. Like I was basically trying to replace a void, or, trying to, I guess, what's the word? I don't know, put on a front, if you will. And it was just ridiculous. Like how I was living and the way in which I was living. I was not financially smart. And I say that because I feel like some people, when they're given these opportunities, like have some wisdom. Have some wisdom before you get in, to these opportunities, and be diligent with the money that you're given and the resources that you're given. Obviously, it's great to have some fun every now and then, but you only get these opportunities ever so often. And albeit in college graphic design and college creative, money's not all there. It's a lot more about the passion. But when you're granted those resources and you want to be able to, uh, if you're granted those resources in this industry, be diligent, be wise, because you only get it once. It doesn't last forever. And so that's sort of just not only with like this industry, but for any industry that you go into, you want to be very conscientious and very smart with your resources that you're given. It's a blessing in the first place. So how can you steward that, and how can you be smart with the resources that you're given? But anyways, so back to the story. So going to Birmingham, being around these teams, I worked in the same office as Daryl Moose Johnson. Moose is one of the greatest people you'd ever meet. The former fullback for the Dallas Cowboys in the '90s era. He's currently he does NFL on Fox on Sundays. He's in the booth. He's calling some of the games, and dude, just a great personality. And I couldn't think of a better person to sort of commission and have oversight of the USFL at the time. Phenomenal individual, just down to earth. And he really did everything to make sure that we were comfortable in what we were doing. And I can remember the first couple weeks when I got to Birmingham, I was sick. I had gotten heat stroke and dehydrated, and I was down for about a week because of how sick I was. Not being able to tolerate the heat. That Birmingham heat is nothing to play with. If you ever go to Birmingham and you are there in the late spring to summertime, dude, bring your sunscreen, bring your water, bring your Gator Light, because you are not going to be able to survive. You got to have fluids in you at all time. And for me, I was a big sweet tea drinker. I mean, I guess that's as south as it gets. Love me some sweet tea, love me the sweet drinks. Now I don't, I just drink water. It's sweet tea flavored. Go figure. You really need to get off the circle drinks. But anyways, um, no, so I end up getting dehydrated, and I'm basically I'm bed sick for a week, and I end up losing like 10, 15 pounds from being sick. But in that experience and kind of navigating that, I kind of felt sort of this tension, because I was like, man, like there were times when I first got there, I guess backtrack, when I first got to Birmingham and I was first trying to get adapted, I wanted to use the camera that I had a lot. I wanted to show off, and I wanted to show that I was capable of putting that kind of work out. But I was not prepared. I not had a lot of experience behind the lens. I not had a lot of experience operating a camera. And again, naive, just stupid, irresponsible, disobedient, prideful, egotistical, whatever you want to call it. I felt like I was hot stuff and I was humbled. Um, the workload as a freelance social media coordinator, especially when your oversight is, here's a little bit of a breakdown. You have two different teams that you're occupying in a given week for 7 days straight. You're putting out video and photo content. And it's at practice. You're trying to feed your stories on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. You have all these different platforms. It is a freaking blessing that there are two people, because if it was one person, that would suck. These low budget spring leagues, to me, are the equivalent to like a G5 and a G6 for a creative. I feel like they are a playground if they are used correctly, because it's not necessarily a pressure cooker, if you will. Obviously, they want their content to be top notch, but in the same breath, um, they don't have the biggest of budgets, so they really will take whatever help they can get. They just want to see consistency in the content that's being put out. And I'm probably the first and maybe the only person to have ever been a part of a spring league and done strictly video content off the phone. And I know that they still try to get some of their phone content with the UFL now and even in the XFL, but like I feel like I was one of those first people that was just solely restricted to the iPhone content and doing the vertical video stuff because I didn't know what I was doing behind the lens. And so that was one of those things where I was like, man, like I got to be so much better than this. And I couldn't, because it was one of those things where I had to learn on the fly. I had to adapt and I had to be able to transition with the speed of everything going on. And it was just one of those things that my colleague had to pull me aside and be like, you know, I've tried to be, not in a mean way, but it was sort of, I try to be understanding of where you're coming from and what you're, how you're trying to adjust and adapt. But I feel like the best thing to do would be doing more so the vertical video stuff, doing the vertical video content, because you're not comfortable behind the lens right now. And so when they could recognize that I wasn't comfortable with that stuff, I was just like, man, the pressure's on. Pressure's on to deliver. Ultimately and inevitably, working with those teams throughout the course of the 4 month excursion that I was in Birmingham, I learned a lot. I gained a lot of knowledge. I ended up, producing and collaborating, and things worked out for the most part working in Birmingham. And I'm forever grateful for it because it proved to me that, I'm not as good as I think I was at the time. And there's always room for, to be humbled and for growth, I guess, for growth and improvement. So I guess flash forward again, here I am back in Joplin, Missouri, again with my parents, trying to figure it out, trying to navigate life. I ended up getting an opportunity in July. So my contract with the USFL concluded after July 2023. August 2024. I like how this always kind of cycles around July to September in that area. Usually in the early fall is when opportunities continue to kind of open up and arise for me, at least from the early onset. Um, I get an opportunity with a local hospital to do advertising and marketing. And I'll say this, I'm not even going to talk about that part. Like, I'm not even going to talk about working for that because that wasn't one of my brighter, I guess, decisions in terms of taking opportunity and running with it. The leadership there, I didn't necessarily see eye to eye with. And it was 6 months for me. It was 6 months of pure hell. And I don't regret leaving the way I left. I put in my 2 weeks with that place after about a 6 month stint, ended up leaving and bailing out the first day of that 2 week notice because I was just tired of being there. And yeah, dipped up out of there. And then I was 6 months unemployed. I went six, seven, probably eight, 6, 8 months, somewhere in there, unemployed, just doing freelance and focusing on sports as a whole. And at that point, I end up I get an opportunity with Indiana Wesleyan University, which is an NAIA school out of Indiana. and I'm working with their women's basketball program. I get this opportunity to do some of their freelance graphics throughout the course of the 2025 season. All the while, I'm working a part-time job at a local Best Buy. And for me, this is kind of where it got deeper because I kind of had to learn how to start over again. I knew that my passion at this point, up until this point, when I'm doing the freelance grind and I'm doing the freelance gig, I'd made a lot of relationships with the USFL. I started the Strive Sports brand, which you can go check out still on social media today and on YouTube. I did a lot of interviews with a lot of the players because I had a really good relationship and good rapport with some of the players that had played in that league. And it still brings a smile to my face because those guys were so open, and they were easy to talk to. And that, for me, I feel like as a creative makes it easier on me because I feel like I could approach them for anything. And albeit nowadays, I know guys like Pat McAfee. I listen to his show religiously. He talks about how bad social media is in the NFL because that's kind of his point of emphasis. And I don't think it's necessarily bad. I do see it sort of gimmicky and where he's coming from, but like I think it comes down to the creative room. I think it comes down to the people that are, building that rapport with the players. And then obviously, like, what creative identity do you want to have? And do how do you want to be around your players? Obviously, you don't want to be in your face. You definitely want to build a relationship and not go in blind with working with players. When it comes to working with players, you definitely want to build a relationship with players. For me, it's a little bit different because I'm on the graphic side now solely. But for anybody that's doing like the vertical video and social media and talking with the teams on the daily and doing photo content and video content, I feel like having a relationship or a good rapport with coaches and players is imperative, because it's gonna foster the best content. Some of these social medias, they're a little outlandish and a little egregious in some of the trends that they like to follow, but it's hard sometimes to be able to kind of pick up and adopt, or I guess really to ideate new trends. It's hard to pick up on that. To me, I see that as a real skill for somebody to start a trend and to sort of, I guess, cultivate a trend. But yeah, that's a little tangent I have about social media. Sorry, my light just. So we get into my time working with Indiana Wesleyan University, and again, this is the first opportunity that I really had working and doing my own branding as a graphic designer. Previous to that, I guess a little bit, for about 5, 6 months after I had worked at this local hospital back home, I was just thinking to myself, like, what am I going to do now? Like, what opportunities am I going to get now? What opportunities are going to arise? I was thinking I had enough of a portfolio at that time. I didn't, to be able to apply for different jobs across the collegiate and the professional landscapes. And time after time again, I kept on getting rejected. I kept on getting no's. I kept on getting the rejection emails, and I screenshotted every single one of them because I was petty. And maybe a little bit of me is still petty to this day. But I felt like in my heart, like, man, I could really make a difference in this industry if I just keep at it and I keep doing what I'm doing. And in that time of doing the freelance work, I really leaned on social media. I went to Twitter. I started getting into some group chats that really kind of fostered growth out of each other. Um, Guys like Austin Chandler, who I've mentioned on this channel before, now is the assistant director of creative for football down at Texas A&M. Um, Guys like Joseph Raines at Yahoo Sports, the guy who started it. Um, Sam Valley from Fox Sports. I mean, those types of guys. Um, all those guys, sort of the founding fathers of I guess this group that I was in, and I use that as sort of like a way to cultivate my own understanding and comprehension for graphic design because I felt like I was established at that point. I mean, I was getting freelance clients, so I clearly was doing something right, but I wanted to be able to expand my knowledge a little bit further. I wanted to take it a step further, and I wanted to study how other creatives were getting into the industry and how they were breaking down that barrier and getting past the rejection and getting past the constant interviews. I saw these guys from when they pretty much not first got into the industry, but when they were young in their careers. Like I saw sort of how they kind of built that foundation. When they went through their interview processes, I was going through my interview processes. And I found people, what I'm trying to say is I surrounded myself with a community that would help foster growth out of me, when I was going through the rejection letters, and albeit I didn't know what the timetable was. I was really just praying for, a yes at that point. I was desperate for a yes. And that's the one thing I'll say, I guess, is sort of my first point of this whole episode is like, don't be so caught up in the no's. Don't be so caught up in the rejections unto the point that you're desperate for one yes. That first yes may not always be the best yes. Um, it's more often than not, I guess in my case, it wasn't necessarily the first yes that was like the one. Like it's not always going to be the first yes that you get. And from my past, I mean, do your research. When you're going into a program, when you're getting into an opportunity, um, really do your research. If they bring you out to see the program, to see the facility, to build a rapport with the interns and some of the creatives internally, like really assess them as people. Um, Beyond just their creative style and their creative flow. You might have an appreciation or an infatuation with a brand, but how do the people work in the brand? How do you see yourself fitting in that dynamic, and how do you see yourself fostering growth and growing at the same time in those, I guess, spheres, or in those departments, if you will. So like really do your studying, but also like with social media, getting involved with communities that will foster growth and help to sort of, build your, I guess, not your brand, not your status or anything like that, but build you up as a creative yourself. Any advice that you can take, because I will tell you more than 90%, probably 99% of the people in that group chat didn't gatekeep. As long as you asked, as long as you weren't an ass, and as long as you were, genuinely coming from a place of curiosity, then more often than not, creatives are going to be more than approachable. And I can speak for every creative when I say this. I hate gatekeeping, and I'm sure a lot of creatives cannot stand gatekeeping, but I am not a fan of gatekeepers. People that want to withhold information that isn't necessarily confidential. I mean, I can understand with brands, there are certain things that we are secret about, but in most circumstances, when you're learning Photoshop, when you're learning Illustrator, when you're learning Premiere and After Effects, a lot of things translate. And so being able to share information that you've learned, which I'm certain many creatives have learned from fellow creatives, and being able to pass the torch, I think that fosters the best community and the best opportunity for growth for everybody in this community. But, anyways, back to my story. Drink break. So, anyways, so I get with Indiana Wesleyan and I'm working with women's basketball. And albeit I'm not like, I wasn't too fond of women's basketball. I'll be straight up. I wasn't a fan of basketball as a whole and designing for it because I'd never done it before. And, I had to really assess like this could be an opportunity for me to grow and really build myself up. And so I took it and I ran with it. And I noticed that, with NAIA programs, I would say with, how do I word this? With guys like Prince, who I've had on this show, Prince is a well established diamond in the rough creative at a smaller level college. I'm not saying all small level colleges are at a disadvantage. Resource wise, yeah, I would say most are at a disadvantage, but it really comes down to the creatives that they bring in and bring up. And it really comes down to the passion that the creatives have. For guys like Prince, Prince is a dime a dozen. And I feel like what he's done with the program that he has, not NAIA, he'd correct me, it's MIAA. But nevertheless, MIAA, NAIA, NCAA, it don't matter. Like that is a dime a dozen for that program and for that size of school. And so I was like, what can I do to make this brand, I guess, as a oblivious client would say, make it pop. How could I make it pop? And really, it just came down to trial and error, taking different elements from what they've done in the past, sampling different lockups, and the different styles that they have, and also implementing my own style and my own flair to it. It really taught me the architecture and the ebbs and flows of branding. And for me, it was the catalyst and the driving point for not only my portfolio, but for my career that would elevate me, and make me more of a candidate for opportunities going forward. And so I really appreciate the smaller programs so much more than the larger programs, because the smaller programs, as I've said time and time again, don't overlook the smaller programs, no matter what level it is. And even at a freelance capacity, you have so much opportunity to work for smaller programs. Think about that. They don't necessarily, I don't know how many have sort of a branding guideline or standard within their athletics. I'm sure most do, but like a social media presence or an established social media identity. Like, you can go in as a creative and capitalize and make something your own from the ground up, and you can develop it. And that is the uniqueness that smaller schools have for creatives. And so when you're going to look at these P4 programs, or you're even looking at the professional scale, don't forget about the smaller schools, because the smaller schools really have unique opportunity for you to learn and grow and excel and do things that you couldn't necessarily do at your Texases, your Oregons, your Tennessees, or Ohio States. You can do so much more with a smaller brand, that may not be as established. So I really coveted that part of working for Indiana Wesleyan and being involved with that brand, and nurturing it as much as I did. But all the while, on the flip side, I was working a putz part-time job because I was making not that much money on a monthly stipend, and I was doing a lot of work, for on a week-to-week basis for them. And I knew that came with the territory, but I had to pay bills. Still, stuff had to be done. And so I'm working this part-time job, and I'll tell you what, man, I was mentally defeated. There was a point where I was at a low, because I was like, man, like, when is this ever going to work out? I did not like the part-time job I was working. I did not want to go to that part-time job. I dreaded it every single day. And it's just like, when is it finally going to work out? When am I finally going to get the opportunity or the chance that I've been praying for and waiting for? And time again, I'm going through the fall and I'm adding to my portfolio and I'm updating and I'm doing these individual projects. I'm working with Indiana Wesleyan and I'm updating my portfolio as much as I can. I'm getting more involved on LinkedIn. I'm finding outlets such as Skull Sparks and Teamworks Online and all these different outlets that I can kind of, find different job opportunities. And still, the rejections are rolling in, the no's are rolling in, being overlooked. Like, it beat me up to the point where I'm just like, man, maybe this isn't for me. And there were points where it was a little bit more serious conversations than that, to be honest. But at the end of the day, it's like, I had a passion for it and I had a drive for it. And I think for a lot of creatives, they get beat up. They beat themselves up more than any of these rejection letters could do to them. At the end of the day, as I've mentioned, it's just a no. And I know some of these ones are hard to take. Some of these ones are hard to adhere to, but I promise you, repetition and just rolling with the punches, like consistently showing up and consistently just trying to figure out ways you can grow and learn, and trying to, and not reinvent, but build on your portfolio, build onto your resume, even with the smaller opportunities. All the small opportunities accrue and they make for big opportunities. I promise you that. Like, and I guess my portfolio is living proof. I have a G5 school and an NAIA school on there. And then the third time's the charm is the P4 school. So it's just like you cannot overlook the smaller opportunities because they accrue and they lead to bigger opportunities. So as I continue in trying to find, the next thing for me, I'm doing the freelance gig. We're getting into the winter of 2025, and January comes around, and I get an email, or not email, but a DM on LinkedIn of all places from an individual that worked at Missouri State. Springfield is just an hour away from where I live, back home in Joplin, and the individual is named Reagan. I'm gonna try to get her on this podcast one of these days. She's now down at Florida State. Shout out to Reagan if she's watching this. Just an awesome human being, tremendous heart, um, and to me, she is one of the most important people who I am so immensely grateful for and so immensely indebted to because without her taking a chance in me, there is no career for me. Um, and so she reached out to me in January of 2025 and she asked if I wanted to help the football program at Missouri State with their upcoming, maybe doing some freelance work as a graphic designer. And albeit I wanted it to be a full time because I was so stubborn and tired at this point. Like, man, I almost said in the back of my mind, the selfish part of me was like, nah, dude, it ain't full time. But I felt like it was going to lead to something greater, and I obliged. I was like, yeah, I'll take an opportunity. And I sit down with Coach Beard, who's now at Coastal Carolina, along with Max, who's the director of football operations at Coastal now, and sit down with them and we're on the same page in terms of our creative vision. They kind of shared what they wanted to do going forward in late January of 2025, and we were on the same page. We were in sync, and they were like, "Man, do what you do, do what you do, and yeah, we trust you to do this. We have National Signing Day coming up, which I think up to that point was like a couple weeks out." And I didn't get started on the project because I'm a procrastinator until like the week of, but um, ended up doing the rollout for their National Signing Day in January of 2025. And I mean, at that point, I guess you could say the rest was history with Missouri State. Um, in the in that short little period of time, unbeknownst to me, I ended up developing their brand or what would be their brand to come for the coming months. And all those different elements, all those different assets that I incorporated, um, I mean, they built out to be something so much greater. It's still my most prized possession on my portfolio. Just the work that I put into Missouri State football. And I think going forward, it's going to be one of the toughest things to beat for me because my favorite sport is, has, and always will be football. And maybe one day I can see myself coming back to it. But the creative freedom that I had with that program, being in my backyard, just an hour away from home, and getting to travel with them, going to USC, going to Marshall, going to, all these different places, New Mexico State. Man, it was awesome opportunities. It was a unicorn opportunity. And I mean, that's an ode to the power of social media, I guess, but also repetitively nurturing your portfolio because you never know who could be watching. You never know who could be seeing your work. You never know who could be coming across your work and being like, yo, I see something in this. Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, as my mother says. And that reigns true even to this day. Like other people, art is subjective, is what one of my colleagues says. And I love that saying. I'd probably tattoo that on my arm. But um, yeah, like that, you got to keep that in the back of your mind whenever you're like, oh, this work ain't good enough. I don't know if I like this piece. nah, dude, like, don't be afraid to take that leap of faith and post that work or send that work to a college that you like. Or I'm not saying like, hey man, just drown their feed or drown their DMs with a bunch of different work that you've done or a brand rollout or something. I'm just saying maybe from time to time posting a piece of work that's associated with a brand or a player, you never know if they may want to collab. You never know what they may see in the work that you don't. So I mean, don't be so hesitant to jump from a project or to detour from a project when you never know what the overall consensus or the I guess feedback may be. Um, but yeah, no, like with the Missouri State opportunity, it taught me so much about this industry and how things move. Obviously, on a week to week basis, things move quick. And I was the only graphic designer there. And I was stressed out a lot. There were times where I was like, man, goodness sakes, like, how am I going to get through this week? How am I going to navigate these waters? But I had to remember, like, this was the opportunity that I came here for. This is my proving ground. I didn't really know it at the time, but I could kind of get the sense, like, if I don't maximize this opportunity, I don't think I'm ever going to get a next opportunity. So taking advantage of the opportunity that's set in front of me, and sure, was it for the most amount of money? No. I still had to do the freelance grind, which was great for me because then I could continue to build my portfolio in that regard. But in the same breath, I wanted to be able to use this as my ticket to get into the industry that I know that I could make a contribution to. And so as time flies, numbers are growing up. We ended up going from what I believe was just about 10 to 12,000 followers in the early onset of the winter of 2025. By the summertime, we had accrued roughly 18 to 19,000, or we're up to 18, 19,000 followers. And we were steadily just progressing. Um, Things like our college football rollout, uh, people were talking about us on YouTube, seeing some of my graphics on billboards, seeing my graphics on social media, seeing my graphics, getting the opportunity to post that content and just have fun with it. Um, that was the beauty of being at a G5 because I didn't have anybody to tell me otherwise. I didn't have anybody telling me the right or wrong way. It was my brand. And I was solely a graphic designer, but we had a team of people. Reagan being at the time, the video content director of video content. And then, we had interns that were doing video and photo and just all of us as a whole. Like we were such a dynamic powerhouse. And I'll say this, I I would say our team here at West Virginia is a pretty decent sized team. I wouldn't say it's the craziest amount, but the one thing I would say that I can benefit from having, a bigger team is more feedback to bounce off of, more critique. Um, because there was a lot of malpractice that transpired at Missouri State, specifically with my design strategy and my approach. And I wouldn't find that out until I got here at West Virginia in November of 2025. It's 2026. Goodness sakes. Feels like so long ago. But anyways, so as we fast forward into the fall of 2025, I'm in the middle of the season with Missouri State, and I get a DM from the director of graphic design here at, at West Virginia and reaches out to me and says, "Hey, really love your work. We're going to be opening up the assistant director of graphic design role here soon. Um, didn't know if you might entertain the prospect of possibly applying." And again, I was like, I don't know if I can get this one. I had already been applying for opportunities. I had actually, I won't name the school, but I had interviewed for a previous opportunity in the summertime and kind of took my time with making a decision on that one. Ultimately and inevitably, I declined just because of certain logistical things that I wasn't necessarily comfortable with. And then I was kind of taken care of by Missouri State to kind of stick around a little bit. And going forward, I was like, all right, I'm here to stay for a minute. I want to lock in, get going into the fall time, and I want to be able to grind this out. And I mean, it was phenomenal. Like every single aspect of it, from the weekly meetings that we had as a team, to the content, um, to practices, to the travel, to the game day. I mean, every aspect of it is literally, I would not trade it for the world. Like it was some of the best memories I have as a creative. And so, I did end up applying for the West Virginia job, obviously, and I didn't expect anything of it. And I go through my interviews, and ultimately and inevitably, I would come to find out it was me and my friend Jeremy, who we've had on the podcast. Shout out to Jeremy. And I get the job, and I accepted it, and I have loved it since I've been out here. I love the people here. I love the community here. I love the team that I work with. I love getting to do what I do as a job, and recognizing that, like, albeit, objectively speaking, I would say that the sports that I oversee right now aren't necessarily the ones that have the most eyes on them. But I would also argue the fact that it's not necessarily about how many eyes are on them, but more so about the fact, like, how many eyes can you bring to them? How many eyes can you generate? I've always had that mindset. Like, at the end of the day, we're the front line of being able to build these brands up and to promote them. And albeit it takes a team. You have video, you have marketing, you have all these different aspects. But like, from a creative standpoint, it's up to us. It's up to people like you, people like me, to be able to formulate an identity for these brands, these sports. Doesn't matter if it's lacrosse, rifle, hockey, tennis, women's soccer, men's basketball, football. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we all have a common goal. It's being able to establish an identity for these brands, ones that embody not only the sport itself, but the brand as a whole. And that is one thing that West Virginia has executed to the T. You know, shout out to Kristen Cold Snow, who's the, I guess, founding mother of this brand, and what she's been able to establish with the West Virginia brand. And then guys like Phil Lynch, man, who doesn't get enough credit for the work that he does. And Reese Owens, two colleagues that I respect, and the colleagues that I try to strive to be like, because and I get a lot of positive feedback from people on social media about the work that I do. And I'm appreciative and I'm grateful. But even I've got people that I'm trying to strive and be like. And I'll say this, sometimes that provides sort of this, I guess, openness to like imposter syndrome or envy. And I don't advise you to pursue that. Like, make take influence from people. That's fine. It's perfectly fine. It's what Pinterest is for, and social media. It's fine to take influence and inspiration from people. But at the end of the day, I'm me and you are you. And so really learn to, you know, encapsulate and mold your own style, because that's what's going to make you unique to this industry if you choose to pursue it. Too many times do I see people on social media trying to copy, and I was once that person because I didn't know what I was doing. And that's fine. When you're going through those steps of just trying to understand what you want to do and how you want to do it, man, sometimes you just gotta, it's a copycat league. You gotta be able to see if you can do it first and then kind of build from there. But if you're at the point in your career where you're like, man, like, I wish I was like so and so, and I wish I could do, this or that. It's like, at the end of the day, you're probably never going to be able to replicate that thing verbatim, but you can take inspiration and influence from that and make it your own, and probably make it better than what you would perceive. So, that's something that I really think I want to drive home. And And really to put a bow on this whole thing, like, man, I don't want people out there to hear this podcast. And like the reason I started this podcast was sort of for kind of this conversation tonight was I want people to understand that like we all come from different struggles and different backgrounds and that's what makes us us. But like don't don't let the struggles of the past, don't let that define, don't let that define your future. Don't let that sway you from your future. I'll say that again. Don't let the struggles of your past sway you from what the future beholds. Don't get caught up in the mistakes, don't get caught up in the rejection, don't get caught up in the depression. Depression is a dark place. I don't wish that upon anybody. Learn how to pivot, learn how to turn your head, turn your cheek, and to move on and to get better. How can I improve from this? How can I get better from this? And how can I translate that for the future? How can I make myself better from that? When you change your mindset and your perspective on those rejections, when you change your mindset and your perspective on the things that have happened in the past, it makes for such a way better future. It just it gives you a way better peace of mind. Like, don't let these things defeat you. Don't let these things eat at you at night. You are a creative. If you've, worked in Photoshop and you've been able to, work for a program, whether it be an intern, any walk of life, graphic designer, videographer, photographer, whatever the case may be, if you're in any one of those fields, you're right where you need to be. If you have a passion for it, then you've got the pursuit. So don't quit. Keep going. Keep going. Keep striving and keep thriving and keep excelling. And don't dwell on the past and don't look at that as like a detour. Because as soon as you get stuck in the past, and that could jeopardize your future. So I know that was long-winded. I think it was an hour and 25 minutes, probably be an hour when it's all cut up. But I want to thank you guys tonight for sticking in the batter's box and really letting, me air out my story. Um, I can't thank you guys enough for supporting this podcast. If you don't take anything else from this episode tonight, take this. I'm immensely grateful for everybody that has shown support and love for this podcast. I don't understand why God puts me in such a place to be able to do this, even if I'm talking to 10 people, even if I'm talking to 100 people, even if I'm talking to one person. I'm immensely grateful to do it. I'm immensely grateful that somebody would even take the time to listen to my God awful, annoying voice and listen to any advice that I have and show appreciation. I've had so many DMs, I've had so many text messages from people that have just said positive things, and I'm immensely grateful for all of it. And I thank you so much for your support. And hopefully, episode 6, it won't just be me. Maybe it'll be somebody else. I'm hoping, I'm praying somebody else. But with all that said, you've been listening to the Creative Juices podcast, episode number 5. Episode number 6 is coming up next week. I don't know who we're going to have, when we're going to have, TBD. But I want to thank you guys tonight for sitting down and listening to this podcast. As always, like and subscribe to the channel. Give me a follow on my socials. And I hope that each and every one of you keep on dominating in this field, keep on thriving, and I will see you next week. God bless. Take care.